We've already discussed about linear equations and how to write an equation given either a slope and a point, or 2 points, or a graph. We have not talked about yet what I call special lines. Those will include any horizontal, vertical, parallel, or perpendicular lines. So if you recall from last year, lines that are parallel will always have the same slopes. So we'll go ahead and write same in here. Whereas lines that are perpendicular, and if you're not sure what that means lines that cross to make a right angle, will always have opposite reciprocal slopes. Just to clarify what opposite reciprocal means, let's take 3/4, for example. The opposite reciprocal would be 4/3. That's the reciprocal part, and opposite means a different sign. So since it was positive, it became negative. If I started with a negative, I would change it to a positive. So if one line has a slope of negative 3/4, the other will have a slope of positive 4/3. So what I'd like to do is kind of walk you through two examples, one dealing with a parallel line and one dealing with a perpendicular line. And what I've done is I've tried to break it down into steps because there are a lot of steps to solving these. Nothing really too lengthy or complicated. You just want to make sure that you're keeping your work organized. So the first thing that I like to do is kind of rewrite the point that my new line will pass through. So the task is to write the equation, so meaning come up with y equals mx plus b, and you have to identify m and b, of a line that's parallel to this line but goes through this point. So my new line will contain the point -10, -2. Now with my old line, notice y is not by itself, and I need it to be by itself before I can make any decisions about the slope. So we need to go ahead and solve for y. So if I were to graph the line that I was given, it would look like this. And as a reminder, your task is to find a line that goes through -10, -2, which would be a point over here, but it's got to be parallel to that one. So it would probably look something like that. You need to find the equation of that line. Now we have no idea what the y-intercept of this line is. It's clearly not going to be 3. So what I'm going to do is keep my slope. Since we're starting with parallel, my slope is going to stay the same. I'm not going to change it. So what I have is a point of this new line and the slope of this new line. And that's really enough information to write a whole another linear equation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to substitute my coordinates in for x and y. And I'm going to substitute my slope in for m. And I'm going to figure out where this is going to cross the y-axis. So since the y-coordinate was -2, that goes in here. And my slope was -2 as well. And my x is -10. We're going to simplify. And so I get -22 equals b. So my work is pretty much done, but again, you were asked to write an equation. So give your answer as an equation. Y equals, my slope was -2, and my y-intercept was -22. So that should be your answer. This one's pretty much the same type of problem, only obviously we're dealing with a perpendicular line. So step 1 is to identify your point, because you need a point and a slope. Your point is 14, -1. Step 2 is to solve for y. Notice in this case, y is not alone. What I can actually do is just add 7/4 x to both sides, and then I actually will have y alone, and it's going to look like this. Step 3 is to identify your new slope. And since the lines are perpendicular, meaning if I were to graph them, they'd look like this. So this line is the 7/4 x plus 12 line. I want to know the equation of this line. Again, I don't know where the y-intercept is, but I can figure out what the slope of that line is. And it's going to be the opposite reciprocal. So it'll change to negative, and it'll be 4/7. So step 4 is going to be to plug in my point and my slope to y equals mx plus b. Now you shouldn't need a calculator for this because 7 goes into 14 twice, so we can divide that. I'm going to get b equals 7. And so to present my answer, -4/7 x plus 7. So that's kind of why I like putting my new slope in a box and starring it, because that's just a reminder when you get to the very end, oh, this is the slope that I need. Okay, I got it. The second part of this deals with horizontal and vertical lines, remembering that horizontal means left to right and vertical means up or down. So if you're asked to graph the equation y equals 2, right away I want you to realize this is a special line because it only has one letter. If there's no x, then it's going to be a horizontal line. And if there's no y, it's going to be a vertical. But instead of you having to memorize this, since it says y equals 2, that means every y coordinate is 2. So just make up 2 coordinates. Maybe you want to do 0, 2, and 3, 2. So you can change your x's, no problem, but your y has to say 2. And if I graph these coordinates, 0, 2, and 3, 2, notice I get a horizontal line. Now if I went to find the slope of these using the slope formula, I would do 2 minus 2 over 3 minus 0, and I'm going to get 0 over something. In this case, it'd be 3. Well, 0 divided by anything is always 0. So the slope of this line is 0. And that seems to make sense because it's not going up and it's not going down. So it's just staying the same. So there's no change, it's just 0. Kind of the Same idea with vertical lines, except now notice it says x equals 4. So again, I realize, oh, this is a special line because there's only one letter. So I'm going to do what I did before, only this time my x coordinates have to remain 4 because it says x equals 4 for all cases. So again, we're going to make up two coordinates. Let's do 4, 0 and 4, 2. And if I plot those, you will always get a vertical line. Now if I try to find the slope of this, if I do 2 minus 0 over 4 minus 4, I get 2 divided by 0. And if you type that in your calculator, it's going to say error. So the rule about vertical lines is they have no slope, which means the slope is undefined. So anytime you get an error message, that means there is no slope. And that kind of makes sense. You really couldn't go skiing down a slope like this. You would just fall. So it's not going up and it's not going down. It's doing both at the same time, and that would make no sense. So we have to say that there's no slope. No slope that we can measure here. So go ahead and take a couple moments and you want to graph each of the lines. You can choose if you know which one's horizontal, which is vertical, or whatnot. Go ahead and try it. If not, I would try the coordinate method. If you check your answers with mine, you should get horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical. In numbers 3 and 4, don't be alarmed. It's okay if you have a line that's actually on an axis itself. Just make sure you shade it really dark so that we can see it. The same thing for number 4. Just shade it really dark. And just kind of review the slopes of each line. Number 1 is a slope of 0. Number 2 is an undefined slope. Number 3 is a slope of 0. And number 4 is an undefined slope.